Right, Angeles, I am so happy that you're here to talk to us about Postbac programs. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience and what it means to even go through one of these programs? But just to start us off, what are Postbac programs?
Thank you, Alex. So post-bac programs are very common for non-traditional students. So anyone that really is taking some time off between their completion of their undergraduate program and their next health professional program, whether that is medical school, dental school, PA school, so on and so forth. And so really post-bac programs have two main goals in mind. The first one, and one of the more common ones, is your academic enhancer. So those programs are completed with the goal in mind to increase your either overall GPA or your science GPA or both. And a little later, I'll talk about the two different structures that exist for post-bac programs. But before I do that, I also want to mention that there are career changers post-bac programs. And really what those do is if any individual took a non-science based major in undergrad, they can still pursue a health-related program. During these career changer programs, really what you're getting into is completing those undergraduate pre-med or pre-health or pre-whatever requirements so that you can then complete the admissions or meet the admissions requirements for the specific program you're interested in.
That's awesome. So basically you're saying like there's two paths to follow and it's never too late.
Yes.
All right. So who should be the students that are applying to these programs?
So I mentioned it just a little bit earlier. Typically it happens for anyone that decides to take gap years. This is, as much as you may identify as a non-traditional student, this also tends to be a non-traditional path. So if you're a student that, when you look at your final GPA once you've graduated and you feel it is not competitive enough to apply to your health professional programs, postbacs may be a great option for you. A little later, we'll talk about some of the factors to consider. And also, if you are somebody that is interested in a health-related program later on in your journey, so for example, if you completed your undergraduate degree in sociology or in psychology covers some of the courses, but any other major that didn't cover your pre-med recs, this also may be an option to consider to help you meet those requirements.
Right. So postbacs are for anybody in pre-health, right? It's not just pre-med students. Okay,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
amazing.
Anybody in pre-health, when you do your research, always feel free that instead of typing pre-med, you can type in pre-health postbac programs. Typically, those undergraduate requirements tend to be similar across the board, regardless of health professions. Some health professions may have specific courses that they want you to take. Anatomy tends to be one of those that is a requirement for some health programs, but not a requirement for others. So get yourself familiar with what those requirements are, and if the pre-health postbac program can help you meet those.
And earlier you mentioned that there were a couple of routes to do these postbac programs. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so one of the common routes that folks take are called DIY postbac programs, and they're exactly what it sounds like. You really do it yourself. With these, I always advise talks to like other students that have done a DIY and get some of their experiences in terms of, what courses did they decide to take. So DIY postbac programs aren't structured programs. It is really like almost like a self-study program. You decide the courses you want to take. You decide where you want to take them. Common places that folks will do these DIY programs are like community colleges is very common. And you can do any undergraduate lower division courses at a community college. If you are looking for upper division courses, you want to do that at a four-year institution that may offer enrollment to those courses. The UC extension programs tends to be very, very common. and we'll talk a little bit about the financial aspect and the difference between the two programs. So there's the DIY, and then there are also official structured programs. And those are exactly what it sounds like. They are 1 or 2 year commitments, depending if you're doing the career changer, which would be 2 years. An academic enhancer typically is a 1 year program. However, it may be adjusted to what your needs are. And so those are, there is a curriculum during the time that you are in the program. Typically, there's a small cohort that also comes along with you. And so you have more guidance in terms of what courses to take, what courses you need. And also there is often MCAT support, there's application support. And so once again, it's a little more structured. There's a lot more guidance than kind of doing it the DIY route. When I talk about kind of the tuition cost and the finances that come in with the two programs, DIYs tend to be more affordable. Once again, because you're doing them at a community college or at the UC extension system or any other four-year university that allows that post-grad enrollment. And tuition may be more affordable at that, in that kind of route. Again, do your research. It really depends on the school that you're doing it at. Official Postbac programs, when you go online and look at their websites, they will have a per unit cost. And so really, really important to take that into account, because if you are taking 16, 18, 19 units, know that that fee is per unit. So it does add up very, very quickly. Again, one other factor to take into account when looking at the difference between the two programs.
That's so interesting. I think you opened a can of worms with that last answer, because I have a couple more questions. So you mentioned you could either go to community college, and it sounds like that would be more to satisfy their pre-requirements. So if you're a career changer and you're doing those classes to make sure that you have that foundation, but then maybe if you are looking more for the grade enhancement, it would be more important to go after those upper division classes, which are only offered in the four-year institutions. Is that right?
Yes, that is completely right.
Okay, so then like people who are saying, should I go for a post-bac? Should I go for a master's? What's the difference? Is there really one correct route? Personally, I went after the master's, and I know that you went after the post-bac. And for me, it's so much money. I want to make sure that I come out of this with a degree. And it was a master's in public health that I always wanted to do. So, whether it was before medical school, during medical school, or after medical school, I knew that it was something that I wanted. So that's what ultimately made that decision happen for me. But what was your thinking around that? Did you consider, getting a master's?
Oh my gosh, you bring up such a great point. Because that is something to note with post-bac programs. Most do not offer a degree. Some will offer a certificate of completion. However, there is no degree attached to the program. Cost is definitely one of the things to consider. For me, I think I was really focused on the academic enhancement that I needed to kind of just make my application more competitive for medical school specifically. I am also interested in obtaining a master's. And to be honest, I didn't even consider doing a master's program. However, a lot of the folks that completed the post-bac program with me decided to stay a second year and complete a master's program. And so that option really is there. I think it's very, very important to take into account what you need for your application. If you need some of that research, if you need some of that community engagement, a master's program may be a really, really good fit. But yeah, getting your priorities in order, because post-grad, the options are endless. And it may be a little overwhelming to make that decision.
That's amazing. I love your laser focus. I'm kind of like in that decision whether I need to take additional science classes, even after that master's. So I'm glad that you were, I need to show them that I can handle the rigorous medical school curriculum, and this is what I need to do. And you've done it. You're on the other side now. That's great.
I hope so.
Anything else you'd like to add, Angeles?
I really just want to encourage folks that are considering post-bac programs to do your research, but most importantly, to talk to students that have already done a program. I think there is a lot of value in the individual experience that folks have. And to take in, it is a big decision to make. And so really focus on, what is it that you need in order to feel comfortable and prepared to apply to medical school or to dentistry school, to dental school, to PA school, and so on. So really assess your needs. There are a ton of resources out there. If you need some resources that can help you make that decision, I'm always plugging in PhD, but definitely reach out to us. I will say that for me, the MCAT, not the MCAT, the AMCA's GPA calculator really, really helped me gauge, okay, how many courses do I need to reach my goal GPA? And that allowed me to make that decision of, do I continue a DIY route, which is how I initially kind of got started with postbacs, or do I need a more structured program that will kind of facilitate all of these courses being met or all of these units being met in time? Because it is something to consider when we take gap years. I came out of college saying, I'm taking one gap year and then I'm applying to medical school. And here we are 3-4 gap years in. And so it becomes very normal for folks to take more years than they had anticipated, but keeping that goal in mind. So yeah, definitely reach out if you need any resources in making that decision. I will be plugging in that the link for the AAMC MCAT AAMC GPA calculator. So if folks want to take a look at it and utilize it, I'll definitely plug that into the comments.
Thank you so much, Angeles. I'll go ahead and put our emails as well. And just to bring everybody to our fold, we recently opened up applications for PEEP, our peer engagement program. So if people are considering post-bac programs or master's programs, this is the space to find out, what does it take financially? How do I prepare? What does the timeline look like? And we'll be happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you so much again, Angeles.
Thank you, Ale. We will see everybody next Wednesday.